but for some reason the policymakers don't think they're very relevant, or they're too busy with other things. They're running for office, they're et cetera, they're distracted. But we were very lucky that we had some support within the government. We managed to have pretty high-level meetings in the Ministry of Education, et cetera. And together with other researchers working on deworming, there started being more interest within Kenya. So one of our early policy successes, right around the time we were meeting with the permanent secretary, et cetera, was actually to change policy in the Ministry of Education to say, hey, deworming is a really good thing. Like, we should do deworming. They didn't have the money yet, but we managed to basically get a policy committee to say, this is something we'd like to do. That was free for them to do. But sort of the advocates of school health managed to get that policy change. Now, once that policy change was made, it was really just a question of getting funding and getting support for doing it, and that came through a few years later. So actually, in 2009, the Kenyan government did their first national deworming program, so nationwide program treating millions of kids. And I'll tell you the details. Some of this was funded by external donors, including some of the drug companies that donated free deworming drugs, but some of it was funded by the Kenyan government. Actually, a big chunk was funded by the Kenyan government. There were a couple of high-level officials that adopted this as a cause, basically. So again, there's sort of a luck dimension. You never know as a researcher when your evidence will be of interest, but there were people that said, look, this is cheap, this is easy, and there were politicians that said, hey, I can get some public credit for doing a good thing, where we can show that it's a good thing. That's actually some of the most powerful uses, I think, of research is when there's research that people feel is credible and they can believe in, then not only are they going to say, hey, we did this program, but it's a program we can show did good things, or is likely to do good things. So this program started getting rolled out, and as there was more interest in the Ministry of Education, they kind of came back to us and our group and said, okay, we want to do this, but we don't have the expertise. So a number of our colleagues that had worked on the original NGO program worked in the Ministry of Education for that year, setting up the national program. So there's just almost like, based on these individuals, this direct link between the Busia program and the national program. In fact, the program coordinator was one of their lead staff on the program, our original program coordinator from 98, 99, 2000. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great question. So for instance, if we look at a country that borders Kenya, South Sudan, new country, they're in the middle of a civil war. Last year they were fighting their northern neighbor Sudan that they just broke away from. It's like an incredibly unstable situation. Thinking of the long-run tax revenue implications of deworming is not on their radar screen. So I think that's your point. And there'll be plenty of other cases where that's true. I will mention in a few slides some other settings where there have been mass deworming programs. So there's certainly this kind of spreading of these mass deworming programs, but political stability will help the policy-making process. I think you're totally right. So how did it work? The way the program was rolled out was interesting. So the Ministry of Education collaborated with us and with donors, and they had this kind of like pyramid model. They started in Nairobi by training a few dozen what they called master trainers, people who really understood how to distribute the deworming drugs, understood the symptoms of the disease, people who really understood what a deworming program would look like. And they had a pretty intensive training course, several weeks training course. These are people who already had some expertise in health education. Those couple dozen people were then sent out into different regions of Kenya in what's called a training rollout to do shorter training courses for teachers in the different districts around the country. So instead of bringing everybody to Nairobi, which would be more expensive, there were these master trainers who were sent out around the country, and they did, instead of multi-week training, more like multi-day training with local teachers who were going to basically administer the program. This is the teacher training. So you have this rollout of training down to lower and lower levels. At the same time, in the ministry, they were buying these, getting these, well, they were getting donated. They were basically getting shipments of the deworming drugs, millions of doses of the deworming drugs. They were storing them, cataloging them, and then they had to ship those out to all the different schools. But then the teachers who'd been trained were the ones who administered the pills. So that made it a lot cheaper than having like one team travel everywhere. You basically send the drugs, and then there's staff there that knows how to administer them. It's also more sustainable because then the next year, there's a trained teacher in that school. Again, all you need to do is basically send the drugs, and there's a teacher who knows what to do with them. And that really reduces the cost of the program. And then they collected data on the number of kids who took the pills, et cetera. It was really interesting. It became a big news item in Kenya. Several ministers, these were two different ministers, the public health minister and the education minister were there. The permanent secretaries were there, which was a very high-level bureaucratic official. It was on TV, et cetera. So it became this sort of event. And then the actual deworming got rolled out. So this is just one example of where kids are basically lining up to get deworming drugs. So the whole process takes a couple of hours, but it's really fast to administer the pills to the kids. So it's like, isn't that disruptive? It's basically twice a year and a couple hours each time. Any questions on the setup of this program? Okay, so these are just some of the statistics, and then we'll give you a little bit more of the implications of it. So 45 districts were targeted. This is about 3/4 of all districts. There are actually some districts in Kenya in the highlands that are cooler, where you don't have any worms. So worms thrive on certain types of soil conditions and warm temperatures, really tropical conditions. But in some of the highland districts, they didn't need to do mass deworming because there were so few kids infected with worms. Yeah.
How long did it take for them to administer all of it?
It was several months, and the setup took many months more. So the setup of the training and the buying the drugs and all this kind of stuff took longer, but then the actual administration took several months.
But it's not like it took several years for them to get it.
No, in fact, in that sense, it was administered pretty well. It was something that the whole thing from start to finish was like a year between the setup and the training and then the administration of the drugs. So in that sense, I think it was a success. And you can see they reached, they trained 16,000 teachers, 3.6 million kids in 8,000 schools got deworming. So it's really something that reached almost the whole country. Millions of kids were treated. Yeah, Martin. Exactly. And in our discussions with them, I'll tell you what we were interested in doing, but I think I mentioned this maybe a couple lectures ago. We were very interested basically in the border areas between the areas that got treated and the areas that did not get treated, not because of the experiment, just because these not treated areas, say in the highlands, just didn't have as much of a worm problem. So we were kind of hoping we could get some information on the schools right on the border, because some of them would get treated now. That's a kind of traditional design. Like one area is treated, one isn't. Of course, the issue for us here is their externalities. So for measuring the guys right on the border, even in the not treated areas, they're going to have some benefits from treatment. So then we said, okay, we've got to get the guys on the border. We also got to get people at least like 5 or 10 kilometers in, and then all of a sudden it started becoming a much bigger data collection operation. And basically the folks doing the mass program didn't have the funding for that, and they, once they got rolling, they didn't want to slow down. And I think that's natural in policy programs. There were politicians and others who were, this was to their credit, they're building their careers around the success of a new program, some of them. And once it got rolling, they weren't going to kind of wait for us to kind of do our research. So that's the challenge we face very often as development researchers, is the problems are so severe that you really need to have a special situation and the right sort of partner to allow you to collect the kind of data that you need. And we couldn't in this case. The overall cost was 36 cents per child. So this is the number I'd given you before. Now, going forward, because they wouldn't have to do the training every year, this cost would fall. Some of this cost is the cost of training all the teachers. And you don't have to retrain the teachers every year. So the real cost is probably less than this. It's really like pennies a dose to do this intervention. Yeah. Let me mention a couple of other cases in just a slide or two. There's several other mass programs I'll mention in a couple slides. And let me mention one other thing before I go on, which is in 2010, the Minister of Education, Sam Ongedi, was basically busted in a corruption scandal. And major donors, the UK government, other major donors, basically pulled a lot of their funding in education and health and in the social sectors temporarily from Kenya, and the national deworming program stopped. So it happened in 2009. Then it stopped for a couple years. We were really happy it happened in 2009. We were very depressed when this happened because this guy was actually an ally in this project, even though he was corrupt in some distribution, basically distribution of textbooks, where I think he was getting kickbacks. What ended up happening then a couple years ago was the Prime Minister of Kenya at the time made an announcement, and this was something that we had been working on with our friends, our nonprofit friends, a nonprofit with this kind of funny name, Deworm the World. But they're basically like our friends and our advocates here. They could have been maybe a little more creative with the name. But they had been working behind the scenes to try to get donor funding to revive the Kenyan program because it had been a national program, it had been a success, and they partnered with Odinga, who's a very big supporter of the program, and they ended up getting 5 years of funding support at several $million a year. Oops, sorry, my pen's working. Starting in 2012. So national deworming has now been ongoing in the last 2 years in Kenya. So there's again a mass national program. The government is putting in proportionally less of the money, and more of it's coming from an outside donor at this point, which isn't ideal. It'd be better to have all of it funded locally in a sort of sustainable way. But the government is running the program. They're supporting it with staff, and they've actually upped it to treat about 5 million children per year right now. So it's a really big program. There was a hand up. Yeah.
Is there a lot of overtraining teachers, and if there is the responsibility of the school once the national parents come to the school that any kind of hiring teacher is kind of really happy?
Yeah, it's not every. So the good thing is it isn't every teacher in the school. It's only like 1 or 2 teachers in the school, but that teacher could still leave or move. And I'm not sure exactly how that works now. I'm not sure how the communication goes back up. Say, hey, we need a new person trained. I'm not sure how they've worked that out. But it's a very good question. It's like reduce costs in the long run and make sure the logistics don't break down over time. Okay, so what are some other successes? I'm just mentioning one here, actually. I'll say a few more of the et ceteras. Deworm the World also helped getting funding and technical support for several major programs in India. The largest one in terms of numbers was a program carried out a few years ago in the state of Bihar. So Bihar is one of the poorest states in India. And sort of always had very low education and health indicators. And there was a mass deworming program in Bihar a few years ago treating 17 million kids. There was a mass deworming program, I think, 2 years ago in Delhi, in the capital, treating a couple million kids. There's been a mass deworming program in Ghana, in West Africa, treating millions of kids. So it isn't universal. These are still just sort of points on the map where it's been done. But just in the last 3 or 4 years, basically tens of millions of kids have been treated with logistical support and financial support from Deworm the World, who are basically colleagues of ours and friends of ours who work with us on the Kenyan program. And they've established very good relationships with some of the drug companies and the health experts in this field as well. So there's, I think part of the reason I like starting with this case, and of course it's going to get into a lot of research and research methods, is this is a case where research evidence can help lead to change. I think most observers, or almost everybody that observes this case in Kenya, thinks that without the findings we've been talking about, the schooling findings, there's no way this program would happen. Because it was the Ministry of Education that took the lead on the program, because they wanted to improve schooling outcomes. It wasn't just seen as a health program. It was seen as health and education. So multiple ministries got together, led by the Ministry of Education. And without our findings, it seems unlikely that would happen. I think we contributed. There were other researchers who also contributed, but the research evidence here has led to an important change in policy. They incorporated that into the design. I should have mentioned that. That's a good question. They announced these deworming days in advance, and all kids in the relevant sort of primary school age, even if they dropped out of school, can come to the school and take the drugs. So the idea is even if kids have dropped out, they should access this program. There's an attempt to get them to come to the school. And I think as their efforts, I think especially in these later years, they've gotten better and better at doing that. So I think that answers your question. Basically, they did try to get everybody involved, and the hope is that those kids' health does improve. Maybe eventually they can get back into school. The school enrollment issue is a little bit less of an issue in Kenya now than it was when we started our program, just because school enrollment rates have been going up. So there are fewer primary school age kids who are just not in school at all in Kenya than there was 15 years ago, but there's still some. So, yeah. There's some parasitologists collecting that data, and they're going to these areas that got mass deworming to measure. They're taking stool samples and they're trying to measure the worm loads. I mean, they found that worm loads fell a lot after the mass program, of course. I'm not sure how much research they were doing. In some ways, from a research point of view, the fact that there was that corruption scandal and the program stopped was really good for the research. But I'm not sure that there's a team in London that's been collecting this data. I'm just not sure how continuously they did it, because then for a couple years there was no deworming again. So you could trace out over time, like how quickly does worm infection sort of revisit these areas, right? And I know they collected data right after the initial round. I know they were collecting data in 2012. What I don't know is how continuously they were monitoring it in between. But that would help us really understand the parasitology really well. And I don't think they know that data well. Yeah. Yeah. You're saying the returns in terms of schooling outcomes, or you're saying investing in those things in order to eliminate the worms? Yeah. So should we buy pills or should we build the trees, right? So this is something I think we spoke briefly about, but only for a few seconds last week, which is that's the alternative approach. I mean, improve sanitation and hygiene. The conundrum or the sort of barrier you run into is this barrier of behavioral change again. It's a little bit like the barrier we talked about with the health behaviors earlier in this lecture, which is even if you build latrines, if people don't use them regularly, they don't wash their hands enough, you're not really going to solve the problem. So in this part of Western Kenya, when we did the study, over 80% of the households had a latrine. So it wasn't really an issue of not having a latrine. It was just that kids weren't using it regularly. They weren't washing their hands. So in the short run, this is definitely the right way to go. It would be really good to change behaviors, invest in better sanitation, and then you wouldn't need to be doing the deworming pills all the time. But we don't have a very clear way forward there. We haven't solved the behavioral problem well enough. If we do, then that would be maybe a more viable alternative. Yeah. There is, as part of the teacher training, some health education in the program. Just explain to the community and the kids what's going on with the program, but it wasn't emphasized. There was less, my understanding is it was less than we had in our program. It was actually a considerable amount of health education in the program we did, in part because the NGO we were working with really wanted to do it. They'd actually been doing a little bit of localized deworming in some schools in the area before, and they had a, they really wanted to push it. So there's some health education, but the drugs are the focal point of the national program. Yeah.
In terms of opportunity costs, have there been any sort of cost benefit analysis of treating deworming over choose one sort of family to treat versus other things that would benefit the health?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. One of the things that makes, there are some estimates out there, I'm not sure how much I believe in. There are these estimates, maybe some of you have heard of these things. There are things called DALYs, disability adjusted life years. That's the acronym, which tries to quantify the sort of harm caused by different diseases. And then if you get the treatment cost, you can say, like, how much does it cost to eliminate DALY? This is, in the sort of public health world, kind of widely used. It's not clear exactly where these numbers come from. Sometimes they say that these numbers come from estimates about how schooling improves, et cetera. One thing I can say about the cost effectiveness of deworming, and this is, I think, an important part of its attractiveness, is because the worm infections are so widespread and you can mass treat without diagnosis, because, you know, there are minimal side effects, the drugs are safe, et cetera, it makes them so much cheaper to treat. With most other conditions, there's a diagnostic process. Like, someone comes in and says, I have a fever. Well, in rural Kenya, having a fever could be one of 3 or 4 very serious things. And if you're going to treat it, you've got to get some blood work done, you've got to test it, and then treat appropriately. And just the interfacing with medical personnel, medical diagnostics, et cetera, costs, I mean, $5, $10, $20, whatever it costs. So the advantage of deworming is not to say we shouldn't do anything else. It's just say this is so cheap. You know, for a few $1 million, you can treat the whole country, and that makes it, I think, pretty attractive. Or that's the advocates of it have often made that case. I think in some ways my co-author and I are like reluctant advocates because we're researchers and we want to present the data, you know, as it comes out, and like there were no test score effects. So if you think test score effects are the only thing that matter, then maybe you don't care about this. That's fine. But you know, as we've disseminated our findings, you know, of course we've come into contact with policymakers and we want to share them. And so you know, we're trying to we have to maintain our integrity as researchers. We're not policy advocates. We're not lobbyists. But our goal is just to share the data and the results as clearly as we can. And the results so far seem very promising. So, any last thoughts or comments? All right. See you guys on Thursday.